Welcome to today's webinar presentation, Tips for Fee Management when Background Screening. I'm David Graves, your host at GroupOne Background Screening. I am also the sales representative and your HR consultant for all things background screening. I'm here today with Danny Davila, GroupOne's Director of FCRA Regulatory Risk and Consumer Compliance Advisor. It's an honor to have you today with us, Danny, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here, David. And in addition, just so that for the record, I want the people on the other side to also feel free to ask. We do have Steve Fischer here today with us, our operations analyst, who can also answer questions regarding the technical portions of what we're going to be discussing. So as you start going through the presentation, let's be aware that we're available to answer your questions during the presentation at any time. David?
Awesome, and thank you for bringing that up, Danny, about questions. We will have a question and answer time at the very, very end. So you should be able to, in the app there, go to webinar or whatever the thing is there, be able to enter your questions online, and we will address them at the end of the program.
Type them into the box there, and we'll see them.
Perfect. Just a little bit of bio on Danny. Danny has worked in the background screening and talent acquisition field for over 30 years. He served as an employment manager and director of workforce recruitment at Parkland Hospital, or Parkland Health and Hospital System, for over a decade. Later, he served as the division recruitment manager at HCA North Texas. He's been now with GroupOne, is it 8 years now?
Right, 2015.
Wow, time flies. Providing his experience and expertise involving decisions related to FCRA regulatory risk and compliance. And Danny, again, it's a thrill to have you here today with us to provide your insight and expertise on our topic. And I am very excited about today's topic because I believe it's really going to be highly educational, informative, and extremely practical for our audience to know how to save dollars when it comes to their background screening budgets. But before we proceed, I do want to remind our audience, unless Danny's done some other education that I'm not aware of, we neither one are attorneys or legal professionals. I know I'm not. The information that will be presented today is not to be considered legal advice. You should always consult your legal counsel when it comes to background screening compliance issues. However, the information that we provide today, we hope it will be helpful in your selection process and give you better insight into what it takes to build a stronger background screening and hiring system. And then let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been having served as an HR generalist for over 20 years. I can personally remember ordering countless background checks for new hires and getting an invoice for the background checks the following months. And to be honest, I would be completely sometimes floored when I would get the invoice back from the background screening, because I knew I had a base fee and that's what I anticipated that I would pay, but then there would be all these other fees like county fees and other different fees that kind of went along with it, and I didn't really understand it as much as I do today. But I'm glad that we have Danny here with us today, because Danny's going to walk us through the background check ordering process and help us to understand what some of these fees are, because many of these fees are outside our control and they're sent to us from our vendors and we just pass them along to our clients. But we're also going to talk today, and Danny's going to go into some tips and tricks that'll help save you both time and money when ordering your background screening reports. So without further ado, I'm going to let you take it from here, Danny, and just start talking about how they can start to manage well their fees when it comes to background screening.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, all. This is a topic that I think we've been really wanting to address for the last year and a half or so. We're no different than the economy. I think you've seen this in major publications, but overall, as a society, we are being feed to death. whether it's your banking fees, whether it's your rental fees, whether it's buying car automotive registration. All the fees are not put into the actual request that you make. The background check industry is no different, unfortunately. So what I'd like to do today is address 5 different topics regarding this and walk them through, not only by myself, but with Steve Fischer, like I said, and with David, and along we have our trusty moderator and technical and editorial guidance guru, Chris Wilson. Chris Wilson is manning the station, so if you get out of hand, Chris will make sure we control it as best as we can. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So the first thing we got to look at is the primary source fee generation by category. One of the things David and I discussed this morning was, should we focus on as he called it, the elephant in the room, which is the work number. That is only one portion of the actual fee structure. I don't want to get caught up in addressing just that specific source. Although it is one of about 60 that I have a list of that I can go back and just say this company has charged us for this fee. I will say this, and Steve brought this up right before we started talking, is that the increase in the actual fee amounts from these companies has significantly moved up over the last couple of years. So where something used to cost $18, now it's costing $79. And that is the reality that we face. And unfortunately, you as the client and the person requesting the information is going to be assigned with this financial responsibility. Now, part of our discussion today is how do we communicate denials or flat out just rejection of these fees? And what's the consequence of that? I think that's going to be the important piece here. And this is where I will need you as the client and the end user to go back and have some serious discussions with your compliance officers or your HR administrators to be able to determine, do you need this information to complete your background check? Some of this information can be completed by other sources without maybe the fees. However, you'd have to get that clarification from that source. One thing I also want to touch on will be what's mandatory versus elective. Mandatory, I think we want to draw the line at any criminal or sanction type review, because by that, you are going to have to be in compliance with both Joint Commission and CMS. However, some of the other elements of the background report could be, again, retained and obtained through other sources. So when I say elective, that could be, do we elect to incur a fee for employment verification, or should we consider other options? Cost control strategies that can reduce fee expenditures. I'm going to show you or share with you some behaviors that you and your team can take to reduce these fees. Some of this is going to require that you revisit and assess your own processes and be somewhat discreet in how you begin routing these referrals to us for verification. And that means that you may have to do some filtering yourself. So we're going to get to that in a second. And then at the end, I'll summarize it by talking through some monitoring. And as you may or may not know, you have the opportunity to monitor your spending and expense management through the system. And through that, you'll be able to see and project what your amounts are going to be looking like per month. Now, we all know that this is a utilization fee type process where the only time you incur fees when you use the system. So if you order something, you're going to incur it. So I think it's important to note as we go through this, some of you may have accounts that only require criminal court reporting or sanction reporting, then your fees are going to be nominal. But if you're going after employment verification or education licensure verification, those sources will be charging a fee to you. And so that's what we want to get to. So, all right, I think Chris is keeping me on point, and we're now on the fees issuance by source or by purpose. So let's go down real quickly through this list. Again, you'd be surprised, as I was. As David mentioned, in my lifetime at Parkland and at HCA, while I knew about these fees, I didn't realize the enormity of this fee structure, because you have fees from all sources. So even at the county courts level, so you would think these are public records, why aren't they free? Well, unfortunately, the clerks do need to get paid every 2 weeks. And even the clerks that don't feel like working have to still get paid. So therefore, what happens is we're going to get a fee incurred by a court. And here's one piece of advice. I'll start with the first one. If you do not have to run a county court report in New York, I would advise not to, because a singular report for county criminal search in New York is $95. And that is just to tell you whether somebody has a criminal conviction in New York. Now, if you have to, just understand that is something that you'll have to explain to your leadership. When I see these invoices, I'm aghast that, again, New York, which is a much smaller state than Texas, can charge that much more for a fee that you would assume, because it's pretty much online and doesn't have, the physical demands that you would assume, still charge that much. However, it is what it is, and we have to communicate this to you. So keep that in mind.
What is a normal one, Danny? Like Tulsa, Oklahoma, or a county? Is it just under $1, or is it just something like that? I know New York is outrageously way out.
Yeah, I think David
out of the solar system compared to other counties.
Yeah, David's question is pretty relative here, because county courts, again, as a rule, don't charge, right? If you had, I don't know, let's just say 800 county courts in our universe. The 800, I'd say about 700 are not going to charge anything. All right, but the 100 that do will charge anywhere from $5, $3, $2, $8, depending on the jurisdiction and depending on the report itself. Here in Dallas and in Tarrant County, for example, we right now subscribe to a service through Dallas County where we don't pay a fee. Tarrant County, we pay a quarterly fee, and that quarterly fee is very nominal. But if we have to get additional information from that source, there is an added charge. But I was just sharing with Steve before that some counties are now increasing their fees as a result of this clean slate law, which requires more manual research conducted by the court clerks. For example, counties in Arizona are now charging $28 per search at a county in Arizona. So again, you got to know what county we're requesting. Can your team, and I'm talking to you, the client, can your team call us ahead of time and find out what that is? Sure, you can call us, you can email us, preferably email, and then I can give you a heads up as to how much this is going to be. Then you can elect to deny it if you want. It's up to you. However, again, that's where I say go back and talk to your compliance folks to see how much of it will you need and how much of it you don't. All right, so now we'll go to education source providers. Education source is just that: colleges, high schools, trade schools. And they each also charge a different amount. So let's start with what I think is a very low baseline cost, which is the Dallas Independent School District. Chris's alumni, my alumni.
I am.
Yeah.
Kimball High School.
And that LG Pinkston High School here.
Lake Highlands.
Lake Highlands. And so from that perspective, those fees are $8.33 to get a transcript from the DISD. Some transcripts offer it at no charge, right, depending on the size of the school. But now, more and more schools are turning to third-party providers. And those third-party providers will go ahead and charge a fee. And there are at least 20, 25 of these vendors throughout the country. And here are the names of them so that you'll see that I'm not stretching it. I'm going to share this with everybody. I'm looking at Chris. I have a list of all the vendors and their fees. And because you're on this call and you're participating in this webinar, let me make sure Chris gives me an email to all of you. I'm going to send you this list, okay, as an added incentive for participating. So that'll help, right?
Right.
But one of the things is Amazon, for example. Amazon has a service called Scribbles. They charge on an average $8 to $11 per each report. There's a company called Diploma Sender. Diploma Sender charges $30 for their verification of a transcript. A company called Need My Transcript. That's the name of it. They charge $16. So again, you have different sources that charge different amounts. Goes back to what I've been preaching since I got here about 7 years ago, is if you don't need high school education verified, then you may want to rethink, why am I submitting it? The other thing you have to do is when you're submitting a request, be very clear. Are you requesting a GED attainment or high school diploma? We have a lot of friends who just didn't make it through the 12th grade and said, I want to go explore the world. And so they never graduated. They did get a GED from their local library later on. But guess what? That GED is not going to come to the school district. It comes from the state. And I don't care what state you lived in, they all are issued by the state. So when you give us a school to verify, we're not going to get anything. If anything, they're going to tell us no records found. So again, when it comes to fee management, know what you're requesting. That's going to be the important factor here. Know what is it that you're requesting. Other education fees, as most of you are aware of, especially when we start verifying fees for colleges and universities, we work through the National Student Clearinghouse, and they have a fee. We pass that fee on to you, and it's very nominal. It's under $10 right now. And that fee is very reasonable, right? So we're lucky that that has not gone up. However, other trade schools, proprietary schools, may use other sources. Those fees can range from $10 to $15 per resource. So again, if you didn't need all the education items verified, then you may want to cut back on that and reduce your volume. Employment source providers, this is going to take up quite a bit. So I'm going to try to be concise, but I'm going to try to be as thorough as I can. First of all, most employers nowadays have either they choose to verify the employment directly to their HR or payroll departments. Those will not have a fee attached to them. If we can get an HR or payroll department to provide us their contact source, we will go to them and obtain the information. No fee, it's done. However, if that company says we work through a third party, and that third party, again, there are about 20 various sources that could be it. Those sources can charge you a fee, and those are the ones that we have increased in the last several years. For example, as many of you know, and we'll go back to the big elephant in the room, that is Equifax, the work number. They have a service that basically provides employment for many, many sources in the country. Here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, how it affects you is that if you have anybody on your list that has worked at UT Southwestern, Methodist Hospitals, Texas Health Resources, Baylor Medical Center, and any of the Tenet hospitals, those sources will all be procured through the work number. Now, here's the challenge. If you have one item, it's going to cost $79. But if you have 5 items, it's going to cost $79. So it makes financial sense that if you have 4 or 5 items, you'll get a better value for that verification. And if you have other hospitals or other employers that are part of the work number, it's still only $79. However, if you only have one employer and that's what you're verifying, yeah, you're going to have a cost that's going to be twice as much as what you originated the order for. And it is what it is. So what I'm telling you is, again, go back and see how bad do you need this employer. Here's some things that I've noticed over the last year that I need to share with you. Some of you are submitting employment verification orders for somebody who worked in 1998 or in 2002, 2003. You have to ask yourself, is an employer that you're verifying 20 plus years ago worth the $79 that we're going to charge you from the work number? That is a question that if I'm you and I go back to my budget manager or I go back to my administrators, I have to be able to say, if we don't verify this, then we will be okay financially. How much do we need it? And again, that's where, again, go back and have dialogues with your leaders to determine how much of that is absolutely essential. Now, the other piece to this is the Equifax is only one piece. There's other employers, and the others are more reasonable in their charges, anywhere from $48.95 for HCA hospitals to $37.89 to others, $29.95 for some others. There's a wide range, but the biggest cost factors here are the Equifax verifiers. What I ask of you, though, is a couple ways to control this, and we're going to get to that in a second, but employment source is the most costliest of all of the actual collective verification sources. We go to licensure source providers. That's another big surprising fee base if you're hiring AANPs. If you're hiring a nurse practitioner, that fee is $40 alone for one verification. If you are verifying an ASCP, a med tech, it's only $15. So each fee, each service comes with its own fee. Nursing organizations that go to nurses or the Texas or the state board of nursing organizations don't charge a fee that is going to be outrageous. But these are. So keep that in mind. You do have some licensure fees that are going to come across. Then you have the motor vehicle report providers. If you are requesting a motor vehicle report for your reports, each state is responsible for issuing the fees. Some are, again, the prices range from $40 per report to $10 to $15, depending on the state that you're requesting from. And so, as you would imagine, some of the states are going to be more unreasonable than others. So again, ask yourself the question, how often do you need this? Is it annual? Is it biannual? Is it once a year, every 2 years? Ask yourself that. And then the last item is something that we talked about this morning. Steve reminded me, and that was the international fees that we pay for obtaining employment or education, and recently licensure information from from international countries. So let's just put it like this: we're going to try to get information from those countries, whether it's Pakistan, India, whether it's Nigeria, whether it's Germany, whether it's Canada, whether it's Mexico, any country outside the United States. However, each country has its own fee structure. And obtaining the information also costs us the use of a third-party vendor that we have to use to coordinate that communication and the attainment of those records. And as you would imagine, it's time-consuming and it's also costly. So if you ever need to get an idea up front of what that's going to look like, just shoot me a note. I'll be more than happy to share what those costs would be according to each country. And it's, as you already have experienced, it's not one of the most fastest turnaround time items, but it can be done. But it is a costly expense, and we do really need your consent before we move forward on these. So we also have credentialing research fees that we run into. We talked about the New York criminal search fees, the school fees. The one thing that I wanted to make sure that you understood is any of this item, if we have it available to us without a fee, we will always try to get that to you whenever possible. There is some historical data that we can reuse, especially if it hasn't expired. But we have to be thoughtful of the regulations that we're provided to report or re-report information. All right, Chris, I think we move on. So the next slide we want to cover is going to cover client approval process. So here's where I think we're in a struggle here. And the struggle is going to be this. If you want your item completed quickly, we can bypass approvals and incur the cost and get your report turned to you in a day. It's one of those things. Unfortunately, we pay for the convenience. And so you have to ask yourself, if I want to incur this fee, I have to understand that because it's going to come to me in a matter of minutes, I have to pay these fees. However, if you want us to wait till your approval, we need to be able to make sure we have the right contact people we can send a note to and say, will you approve this fee? And we need your response within at least, I don't know, a couple of hours. An hour would be great, because then that way we can either move forward with the order or we can say, no, let's go ahead and close it out. The idea, though, is that if we can agree on some kind of fee threshold up front, if you tell us I'm not going to approve any fee over $100 per day, then we as a team can look at the order and see if it's gotten to that threshold and just put on the order, no fees required. We have clients that have told us no fees at all. Now, and I abide by that. It's a lot easier. Steve does a really good job of posting those warnings on the order. So the order comes to us and it says no fees incurred for no purpose. So if one of these comes back and there's a fee required, we cancel it and just post and document it that is their direction, that is their instruction. But if you want an approval, I think it's going to be important is to find out who's going to approve it and what's the threshold. And then that way our team can contact you whenever those come about. Now, some of you are inclined to approve, let's say, 95% of the fees that come through. That is someone that we can work with, but we just need to know, give us a threshold as what you won't, approve. If there's a certain amount or even a certain discipline, for example, if you're not going to approve any international, that's good to know up front. We won't waste your time. We'll just close it out as soon as we get it. But we got to be practical. We have to have some kind of interface back and forth on this. Can't make it alone. I can't make the decision to incur a fee if you're not going to pay for it. Because then you're going to come back and say, Danny, you're going to pay for it. Since you're the one that allowed it. You see? And last time I noticed, I don't think I have enough to cover that fee. Just like your budgets probably don't. So, now, specific services like criminal or education or licensures, you can tell us whether you want a fee threshold on that. Certain licensures, for example, if all you're doing is measuring, you're not going to verify anybody over $40, then when we get to a licensure, we won't approve anything over that. Same thing with education. I go back to what I said earlier, though. A lot of this approval fee process is based on utilization. So see if you can understand what I'm trying to say. If you have two colleges already verified and you have two high schools in there because the person moved in between high school, and it's going to cost me $40 to get those two high school education verified when only one of them really produced a diploma, my question to you is, why can't you accept the highest degree confirmed, which you already received with the college verification? To me, that's where that $40 that you just spent, you have to then defend that to your leaders. That's why I would go back and try to make the case. Yeah, and if I could, I'd go on your behalf. But I don't think they'd let me. I don't think my boss will let me either. So I think that's the one thing we can do. The other thing is most of our requests are done by email, and all of you are aware of this. We all grew up in the same era of documentation covering and make sure we document our things and cover our you know what. So I do think we want to make sure an email trail is established for these approvals. Now, I have a question for Steve because it just came to me, so I'm going to put him on the spot. If someone asks, is there an approval process within OSSIO, within the system yet, for us to approve or deny a fee, is that in there yet?
No.
No.
Not for the client side to say approve, deny, approve, deny. That is a good question, and we are adding that feature to the system. It's not in place yet. At this point, we just put fee approval notices in the account so that the researcher that is researching that item has something basically flash in their face that says this client does not approve fees or whatever.
So I think in my discussion and dialogue with you as a client, and most of you already know who, we've had our discussions both virtually by email as well as by phone. And so we've had this discussion, but just so that you'll know, what I think some of the delays that we incur are because we're waiting for an email. So I think I had at least a couple of clients over the last couple of years just say, would there be something inside the ordering system that could either allow or not allow someone to proceed if the fee is not approved? So that's something that we can take back and research. And
it is coming.
Okay.
That is a feature that we brought to the engineers. They are working on it. I cannot give you an ETA.
Cool.
But eventually, yes, the client will have the ability right in the order, on the order page, to say, you know, our researcher will say, hey, you need to get an approval. The client will see an approve button or deny, cancel.
And I think from a client's perspective, they would be a little bit more, at that point, actively engaged in determining up front which fee they want to go after and which fee they don't. And it reduces the actual traffic, email traffic that we have now.
Correct.
Thanks, Steve. So thresholds, things that you can maybe consider as your threshold variable. One would be the expense amount. So let's say, for example, right now you've budgeted X amount for the report. So how much over that are you willing to go ahead and expend? And do you have a variance? If you have no variance, and we have clients who have no variance, and believe me, they express it to me, both by phone and virtually, well, guess what? They have a do not approve any fees on their orders. So we don't even go there. But on the other hand, some of you may have a volume threshold, and this is one that Steve and I hold close to our heart. And we're going to tell you this, and I'm going to be as frank as possible. Some of you have too many employment items that are coming over. And the more employment items that you have come over, guess what? Your costs are going to skyrocket. So, for example, if you have 4 employment items come over, and they all fall within your package, guess what? You don't get charged any extra fees except from the vendor or the data provider. But let's say you don't have any fees on the data provider, then there's no fees. But if you have 12 employers, which a lot of you will sit over 12 employers, guess what the increased chances are now of a work number or a Thomas & Company or if verified to start charging us. And then you have to pay more because you're paying a la carte on your package. So fee threshold is also managing your volume threshold. For example, this is where we're going to lead you to talk to David Graves. David is the guy who coordinates package control. He goes back and looks at your arrangement and sees how can we make this fit better. Let me just give you a secret. We're really not in this business to make tons of money. We're a byproduct of the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council. It was created for one reason and one reason only, and that is for the safety and well-being of the patients, the employees, and our community. And I firmly believe that that is still our mission. So I really believe we're not in this to make a whole lot of money off of this. And we're not seeing anything because these fees are passed through for what they are. So what I'm trying to get to is let's find a way to reduce the risk by reducing that volume. If there's a way we can reduce the volume, I think you'll see a correlation between the fees dropping down as well. It just to me, there's a lot of algorithms that would show that. Education. Thresholds. For example, if you have a minimum education that you have to check or maximum education, let us know. For example, if there's some clients that have said no more than 1 education per report, then that way it manages your fee structure. It manages your fee incurring, the fees that you incur. But again, these are thresholds that you need to come back and talk to your team about. Now, this is a webinar for a lot of people, and we hope that there are hundreds of you out there. But for those of you who want a more specified, tailored communication, both Steve and I can meet with you, and we can walk through this process with you. We've done it with a couple of clients. And we don't mind because our goal is to get you to have more reasonable invoices when you get them every month. That's all I'm trying to do. So for that reason, I think creating a threshold that you can follow is something to do. So as I'm going through, I know David said he was going to wait for questions to the end. If you have any questions that are popping up, Chris doesn't have any problem in bringing them up in the system. Matter of fact, if they pop up, they'll come up, right, Chris?
Yeah, send them at any time, and I'll make sure they're passed on to the experts here.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure, don't wait to the end, because you'll probably have an emergency come up and leave us and not share your question. All right, so let's look at your current report structure. It's like what we just talked about. If you have a package that limits you to a certain number of items per that package, that's where you want to try to stay within that parameter at all times. Once you go out of that parameter and you start incurring what we call a la carte prices, your report costs will start going up. And then you'll also incur fees that you didn't want to incur anyway. My advice is review your structured agreement already. Let's go back and review it again. David will be willing to do that. David?
Yeah, and what Danny's talking about, a good example of that is you may have what's called our healthcare professional package. If you're using that package, it typically comes with 2 employers included, 1 education, 1 professional licensure verification. And so if you're checking just 2 of those, maybe the last employer or current employer and then 1 previous employer, once you go over to 3 or 4, those are priced, I think now, is it $10? I think is our new a la carte rate now. So you're hitting those. But if you're finding that you're needing 3 or 4 employers on a regular basis as part of, maybe you're going back 7 years of employment history and you're finding that you need 3 or 4 employers added, then let us know, because we could restructure a package that includes maybe 3 employers or 4. Same thing with education or professional license. We also, typically a standard package, I think we usually put about 5 counties that's included. We've done research over the years. Steve was part of a lot of that research and found that usually a person over 7 years may have lived in 3 to 4 counties over a 7-year period. So typically the 5 counties typically works, but you might be finding that you're going over at a regular basis over the 5 counties. And I think we add $15 for every county that goes over the 5. So we could potentially make you a package that it goes, 7 or 8 counties or 10, something like that. The price of the package would go up, but the a la carte fees would come down. So we can always restructure a package that is tailored really to your needs, whatever those needs are. So
I think
great point, Dan.
Yeah, the purpose that our goal is to try to get you to have some budget neutrality at the end of the day. In other words, that your budgets are not going to be increasing significantly, so you don't have to discuss budget variances at the end of your calendar year. And I know that's sort of a pain for all of you when you have to try to justify this budget variance for your cost expenditures. It was for me, and it still is. So I think this is a good way to measure it. A couple of things you can also do is start looking at your invoices and the fees that are charged. You can do that yourself. If you need instructions for that, just email us, and Steve can send you the directions on how to do that. You can go into the system, bring up your invoices. You can look at the invoice, and you can see what those fees were, and they were attached for that. So you're not going to be shocked. But you'll be able to see, again, from that historical content, you should be able to determine, well, maybe I shouldn't be requesting all these other items. Because some of these are, again, past a certain threshold that you want to have. The other thing to do is revisit your current workflow to ensure that your current volume of verifications are reflective of your expectations. A couple of things. You just finished going through your student recruitment period. Yay, thank you all, because we're getting a new set of nurses and allied health practitioners. We're getting them from all over, right? However, many of them don't have a lot of a lot of employment experience. So you have to ask yourself, how much do you want to put into an order if it's not going to produce what you need? If all you need is education, maybe have a student package that you can create, and we can work from there. Again, anything to reduce that possible expenditure is what we're trying to do. All right. The other thing, too, is, of course, communication coordination. I will say this. One of my objectives at the beginning of every year is to improve our communication. And I think my goal is to respond to emails within, 30 minutes, 15 minutes of when I get them. I mean, I am diligent, and people who've been working around me understand that. I don't like seeing any emails in my email box. That is just a phobia of mine.
It drives me nuts when someone doesn't respond for like a day or 2 days.
Yeah,
Right.
It's a phobia, and believe me, my pledge to you as a client is to be available for you all at any time. Because of that, then we do need to agree on what those thresholds are going to look like. Because once we agree upon that, that's our movement going forward. Whether it's a $50 threshold or like some of the clients have been very adamant, no fees at all. Some have said no more or no work number fees. Some have said no work number fees. Okay, we'll work with that. Whatever you want to do, we can work with that threshold until we get our system administrators to create the approval within the system. We'll still do it by email, but we do want to get it done as quickly as possible so you don't have to delay the processing or closure of your reports. Again, we should have a strict threshold, and we should be able to respond. If we send an email to your team requesting a fee approval, we would like a response within 24 hours. Less than 24 hours would be great, because then that way the time that it takes to complete the report is not pending a response from someone. It's basically you say yes or no. So in summary, and I think I may hit the mark, Chris. What do you think? Huh? I'm right, 42, right? That's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to be efficient with your time, folks. Anyway, a couple of things. What fees are absolutely needed to comply with your background report? What fees do you really, really have to absorb? Okay? Discuss the range of the report content with your organization attorneys and with your compliance officers. Find out what's absolutely needed, what's not. If you still need all the employment information 20 years back, then we'll abide by it, but just understand the cost of your report will reflect that. So just be aware. Start limiting the volume and the number of years provided for verification. Jobs held for more than 7 to 10 years ago that have no direct impact on a candidate's employment qualifications may be costing you more, that's my bad there, costing more than your budget. Steve did tell me about this. I thought I corrected it, but I didn't. So that's on me. Mea culpa. And the last item is arrive at an average cost per request. Work to stay within that budget. We can provide fees so that you can assess and develop your budget. One bonus from this that we are going to take is I'm going to send out an email to each one of you with a list of the fees that we have already been provided by vendors, and you'll have that to give you guidance as to what those fees look like. Now, as we end the actual discussion point or presentation point, we're transitioning to the Q&A. So if you have any Q&A or any questions that you may want to ask, here's a good time. So Chris, see if you have any.
Yeah, we have the contact information there for our speakers today, as you can see on the screen. And I'm going to hand these questions that came through off to David. David?
Yeah, we've got one come in here. It says, is there any way to go around the work number and obtain employment verifications without having to use them?
Okay.
If it requires the using them, I guess is what they mean.
Okay. If the question is, if a company says that they use the work number, do we have to use them or can we go around them? Is that what you're asking?
That's what I think they're asking.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question, first of all, if a company commits to using the work number, more than likely they will not respond to our request. They will direct us to the work number. That is their standard procedure. However, there are times when we will still make an attempt, just like today. I won't name the client nor I won't name the employer, because I did call an employer, and it's not somebody in Texas. It was somebody based in, I want to say Vermont. And the employer uses the work number, but the person did not show up on the work number report. So I did tell the person I don't find them. So she said, well, what do you just need? I said, I just need their dates of employment and their job title. She said, I can give you that. So she gave me their job title and the dates of employment. So I completed the verification like that. However, not all HR offices are as accommodating. They have a standing rule, and the standing rule is that we go to the work number. Just go to the work number. March yourself to the work number. We don't have time for you. Bye. And so that's what we'll do. We do try other ways if we can, and we do try to utilize other resources when possible.
Got another question coming in here. Is there a way to review the information provided by the candidates before we commit it as an order? For example, we use the quick invite. Is there a way for us to review the information before it's sent in? Because a lot of times, I guess sounds like they're getting.
It's probably the most important thing you could do to reduce or control your costs.
Well, one of the things, right?
I think I stick by this.
One of the things.
It's one of the things,
right.
But what we're talking about is draft mode. So most of our clients these days either place orders via their applicant tracking system, HRIS system, or by using our quick invite process built into the system. And either of these methods, there is something called draft mode where you place the order and it doesn't just pull all the data over that the candidate enters or pull all the data out of the ATS. I know some large clients that are integrated with their ATS system, that employee may have put 20 jobs on their application, and then that ATS integration sent us 20 jobs to verify, even though they may not follow your relevancy patterns or policies, or it goes way beyond how many are included in your package, etc. If we just switch the account to draft mode, then we recommend you have one member, especially larger clients that have an ATS integration. You should have one member or a team or some process for reviewing the order before the order gets sent to GroupOne. It's very easy for us to turn your ATS integration into draft mode, and we've done this for a lot of clients, where that just allows you first to review the order and say, hey, this guy has submitted jobs. He worked in 1968 at Speedy's Hamburgers or what have you. This is not relevant to the position. So rather than waste the money, possibly incur a work number fee or whatever, it's best to have those orders placed in draft mode and have somebody dedicated to reviewing that and making sure it matches your policy. We're only going to request what is relevant. This is going to do two things. It's going to save you money, it's going to avoid fees, it's going to avoid a la carte pricing, and it's going to speed up turnaround time in the long run. So I highly suggest you take advantage of draft mode. If you're ordering via the quick invite process, right there in the quick invite tile, you can select draft mode as opposed to process immediately.
And if your organization feels like it needs like a tutorial on this process, just let us know, and we can arrange for a direct coordinate training for your team to utilize your service. Because I do think it's important to note that the more you can filter up front, and you filter the actual number of volume of employers or education sources, that will help. Gloria, thanks for the question. Now you have a question for us. It says, when a verification cannot be completed for some reason, do we still get charged for it? That's a good question. All right, so I will say this. You don't get a fee passed on to you if we don't incur the fee. So let's talk first fees, right?
Correct.
Because that's the topic that we're covering, fees.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, for example, your person lists Parkland, or let's say your person lists UT Southwestern, and UT Southwestern uses the work number. We go in there and we don't find anything in the work number. We don't pass the fee on to you. But her question is, do we charge her for that specific service, Steve?
Yeah, and so if their package, if you have a package, back to talking about package configuration, most people have a package that may include 2 or 3 employers. In the case you've just asked in the question, let's just say they didn't have a work number. It wasn't a work number employer. We've tried and exhausted every resource. Our researchers may spend, time 2 to 3 or 4 different days on that item. So it is going to exhaust one of the employments included in your package. Now, if you call us quickly and realize, hey, they're not able to verify this, we'll cancel it and it won't affect your package makeup or what have you. But to Danny's point, certainly if we can't get the verification, there'll be no fee passed to you for it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Steve. Thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
Appreciate the question, Gloria.
All right. Well, thank you for so much for attending GroupOne's webinar today. If you'd like to ask any further questions, you can always feel free to email them to Danny or myself. Our phone numbers are included up there on the screen. So anyway, we've got our contact information up there. Thanks again, and until next time, we appreciate everybody participating today and hope you have a great and wonderful rest of your week.